And this one is a cooperative adventure game where players are going to be fighting different monsters and trying to get rid of the evil in their land. Each player is going to be playing as a unique character in this game, each with their own specific stats and special abilities, but each player is also going to have their own player board and their own set of cards that they'll be able to upgrade their actions with throughout the entirety of the campaign. A really neat aspect of this game is that players will be able to level up their characters individually by gaining different items or gaining experience points that they can spend to improve their actions, but players will also be leveling up as a team because there's shared resources that players can generate and share amongst each other. Then there's also a shared bag building aspect to the game, and players will be able to permanently add and remove tokens from that bag, but then players can also build certain synergies between the individual characters, creating different combos and opportunities that can occur when those two specific characters are interacting. This is a game that plays over a series of scenarios that each have their own win and loss conditions, but they can also introduce other aspects into the game as well. All of this is going to be provided through a booklet that's going to be outlining the scenario, but then also providing you the map that you're going to be playing on. And each of these scenarios can play over multiple chapters and multiple pages as players make their way through that scenario. Each of these will also have their own set of chapter cards that players will be able to discover as they move through that scenario, helping them to discover the story, new opportunities, or even additional threats. Each round there's always going to be one active player, and they're going to be moving the entire party to a new location out on the map. Each of these locations is going to have a amount of tokens associated with that location. Then the active player is always going to be taking one of those tokens and then assigning the rest to any of the other players that they want. These tokens can do things like gain you resources or reveal chapter cards, which, like I said, can progress the story, but also can modify the game in different ways. But most of the time, these are going to be introducing enemies to the player. And anytime that you draw one of these tokens, there's going to be a number of enemy icons on that token. You're going to have to draw that many enemy cards and then put them on the top of your board. You're going to be getting negative effects or potentially even triggering the loss conditions of a scenario if you get too many of these cards above your board, so that's why it's so important to decide which players you're assigning tokens to. But on a player's turn, they're going to be able to draw 5 action tokens from that shared bag, and then you're going to be spending those tokens onto the various locations on your board in order to activate the associated abilities. These can allow you to generate rage, which is a shared resource in the game that you can use or share with your other players in order to boost your attacks. But then there's also actions that allow you to attack or stun your enemies, which do allow you to roll attack dice or even issue guaranteed hits or even prevent a monster from activating for this specific round. There's also actions that allow you to avoid attacks, activate special abilities, and potentially heal yourself or the other opponents if you've taken any damage. But then you can also keep any tokens that you don't want to spend for a future turn, but you do have to draw less the amount of tokens that you decided to keep. So you only really want to be doing this if those are tokens that you think you'll really want in the next turn. Once you've completed all the actions that you want to or that you're able to, all the non-stunned enemy cards on the top of your board are then going to activate, triggering any of the actions on any of those cards. And these could have all sorts of effects like spawning other enemies onto your board or healing enemies, but most of the time they're just going to be dealing damage to the player. All the tokens that you used will go back into that shared bag, but one thing to note with this is that each player also has special fatigue tokens that are marked with their character's icon, and you can actually spend these at any time to re-roll any of your dice or use them as a wild action token. But anytime that you use those also go back into the bag, and when another player or yourself draws it in the future, that token immediately goes back to you and reduces the amount of action tokens that they'll get to use on their turn. So you will have a bit of a cost later for that immediate benefit now. But the game continues like this, with players playing through a variety of different scenarios, facing up against a ton of different bosses and enemies, trying to complete the requirements of those scenarios. And if you're able to do so, you're going to be moving through the campaign and eventually making it to the end and hopefully winning the game. And if you are interested in this one, definitely check it out. I'll have it linked in the description down below.